Before I tell you how the foundation cracked and the whole house of cards came tumbling down, you need to understand the nature of the wound. It's not the sharp, clean cut of a stranger's cruelty. It's a slow, internal bleed. It's giving every ounce of your soul to the people you created, only to have them handed back to you and tell you it's not enough. The deepest betrayals don't come from enemies, they come from the hands you once held to cross the street, from the faces that used to light up when you entered a room and now look straight through you. I was trying to anchor myself in a storm I didn't understand, and I almost drowned in the process. Stay with me until the end, and you'll see why turning my back and walking away was the single most courageous act of my life. It was the day I stopped being a life raft and became the shore. It was early April in Maine. The kind of day that can't decide if it's winter's last gasp or spring's first breath. A bitter wind whipping off the Atlantic, but a stubborn, bright sun that promised better things. I was on the back deck, scrubbing salt residue off the glass windbreaks, when my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was Julian. His voice was soft, too carefully modulated. "Hey, Mom, how are you holding up?" It had been nearly a month since we'd last spoken. This was the new normal. Since his marriage to Chloe, our calls had become brief, polite check-ins, devoid of the easy laughter that used to fill the space between us. I told him I was fine, that I was keeping busy with the house, and finally sorting through Arthur's study. A lie. Arthur's wingback chair still held the impression of his body, and I couldn't bring myself to dust it. But Julian didn't need the weight of my grief. "You've been on your own for a while now," he said. And I heard the faint click of a keyboard in the background. Chloe and I were talking. "We hate the thought of you all alone in that big, old house by the water. It can't be good for you." I forced a light laugh. "I manage." The silence and I have an understanding. Then came the pause. That specific, weighted silence I'd come to recognize over the years. The prelude to a request. "I was talking with Chloe," he repeated, as if gathering steam. "And we think maybe you should come stay with us for a while." My breath caught. "Stay with you?" "Yeah, in Boston. It would be great for Sophie and Leo. They miss their grandma. And we've got the downstairs guest suite. You'd have your own space. You wouldn't be underfoot." I didn't answer immediately. The offer felt like a beautifully wrapped box that might be empty inside. The last time I'd visited, Chloe's conversation had been a series of monosyllables. Her attention perpetually diverted to her phone screen. Julian had seemed frayed at the edges, his smile not quite reaching his tired eyes. But the thought of my grandchildren, of Sophie's serious questions, and Leo's unrestrained hugs, stirred a deep, aching need in me. Loneliness, it turns out, is a powerful negotiator. Maybe I was reading it wrong. Maybe this was the olive branch I'd been hoping for. "I'll think about it," I told him. I sat with the decision for a week. I wandered through the echoing rooms of my home, past the gallery of family photos frozen in happier times, the grand piano no one played anymore, the collection of sea glass Arthur and I had gathered on countless walks. I thought about the dinners eaten with only the evening news for company, the nights where the only sound was the relentless crash of the waves against the cliffs. And then, driven more by fear of this endless emptiness than by sense, I made the choice. I packed a single suitcase. Not everything, just enough for an extended visit. I left the house as it was, a silent, slightly dusty monument to a life that was once full. The drive down to their affluent Boston suburb was a 3-hour journey through a landscape of cautious hope and mounting dread. When I pulled my sensible sedan into their perfectly manicured driveway, no one came out to greet me. I had to ring the bell twice before Chloe opened the massive oak door. She didn't smile. "You made good time," she said, her voice flat, as she stepped aside to let me in. The house was a masterpiece of cold modern elegance. All sharp angles, glass, and stainless steel. It smelled of lemony polish and, faintly beneath it, the scent of microwaved pasta. Toys worth more than my first car were scattered across a rug that probably cost more than my monthly pension. A large screen TV was silently playing a financial news channel. Julian came down the floating staircase, holding a tablet instead of his daughter. He offered me a quick, one-armed hug. "Mom, glad you're here." The words were right, but the delivery was rushed. He gestured down a hallway. "The guest suite is all set up. We had to move a few things around, but it should work." I stepped into the room. It hadn't been cleared out. It was a storage room. Boxes labeled Chloe's winter collection and Xmas Deco were stacked against one wall. In the center of the room was a flimsy-looking inflatable bed. Not a proper mattress. There was no closet, just a metal clothing rack shoved in the corner. I painted a smile on my face. "It's perfect, thank you," I lied. That first night, I lay on that air mattress, feeling every shift of my body, and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the house. The hum of a refrigerator, the faint murmur of their television upstairs. The distant wail of a police siren. I told myself this was an adjustment, that I was needed. That this was what families do. But a cold, clear voice in the back of my mind whispered that I hadn't been invited out of compassion. I had been summoned for a purpose I had yet to understand. I didn't know it yet, but I had willingly walked into a gilded cage. The betrayal wouldn't be a sudden, violent event. It would be 1,000 tiny paper cuts. Each one so small you barely feel it, until you realize you're bleeding out. The following days were a masterclass in subtle erosion. I tried to weave myself into the fabric of their lives. I offered to make my famous lobster pot pie. But Chloe said the kids were allergic to gluten and dairy. I offered to tidy up, but she said their cleaner had a very specific system. I offered to take the children to the park, which was accepted with a silent nod, as if I were a subordinate being given a menial task. Chloe's eyes, when they deigned to land on me, held a mixture of pity and profound irritation. Julian was a ghost in his own home, leaving before dawn, returning late. Often shutting himself in his home office, with the distinct clink of a glass decanter following him inside. I asked him once, after the children were in bed, if he was okay. He offered me that same hollow smile. "It's just a lot, Mom. The pressure at the firm, keeping up with all this." He gestured vaguely at the expensive art on the walls. "We're stretched pretty thin." I nodded. I knew about being stretched thin. I'd raised him as a widow on a teacher's salary, stretching every dollar until it screamed. But I said nothing. I just kept smiling, kept trying to find a crack in the ice to pour my love into. One afternoon, Chloe stopped me as I was loading the dishwasher. "Alara, do you mind not running this during the day? The utility rates peak before 7 p.m. I blinked. "Oh, of course. I didn't realize." "It's fine," she said, cutting me off as she glided out of the kitchen. Another time, she pointedly adjusted the thermostat after I'd touched it, sighing as if I'd personally attempted to bankrupt them. Then it was about the water usage. The grocery bills, the cost of the special organic blueberries I'd bought for the children. Every gesture of help was subtly reframed as a burden. And then came the first request. Julian brought it up casually, as he scrolled through his phone, while I washed Leo's sticky hands. "I know this is awkward," he said, not looking at me. "But things are tighter than I let on. The Ethereum loan payment is astronomical. If you could possibly help bridge the gap this month, just until my bonus comes in, I'd be incredibly grateful." I was stunned into silence for a moment. The sheer audacity of it, in this multi-million-dollar home. But the word grateful hooked me. I craved it. "Of course, Julian," I said, the words automatic. Whatever you need. I logged into my banking app that night and transferred a significant portion of my monthly dividend income to him. I told myself it was a one-time rescue. But the next month, the request came again, more strained this time. And the next. It became an expectation, a line item in my budget. My savings, the careful safety net Arthur and I had built over a lifetime, began to silently hemorrhage. And I began to see the cracks in their perfect facade. Julian's phone lighting up with notifications from apps with sleek, predatory logos. Late into the night, the way he'd quickly minimize his browser when I walked past his office. But not before I glimpsed complex charts and graphs. Chloe's daily delivery of boxes from boutique brands. The tags still attached when she discarded the garments in a pile for donation a week later. The tension in the house was a living thing. A thick, expensive perfume of anxiety and unspoken resentment. One night, I baked Julian's favorite childhood dessert. A sticky gingerbread cake. I set the table with their good china, lit candles, hoping to create an island of warmth in the cold sea of their home. Chloe came down late, glanced at the slice I'd saved for her, and said, "I don't eat refined sugar, Alara." You should have asked. She took a single gluten-free cracker from the pantry and disappeared back upstairs. I sat at the long, empty table long after Julian had retreated to his office, staring at the uneaten cake, listening to the hum of the Sub-Zero refrigerator. The message was received, loud and clear. I was not a beloved mother and grandmother. I was a utility, a financial supplement, an occasional babysitter, a silent witness to their decay. And I stayed, because I loved him. Because I thought my love could be the glue that held their crumbling world together. But the dam was about to break, and the flood would wash away every last illusion I had left. The catalyst was a Tuesday. Leo had been feverish and clingy all day. Sophie was sullen, frustrated with a school project. Chloe had sequestered herself in her dressing room. And Julian was on a series of tense, muffled phone calls in his office. I had spent the day mopping brows, mediating arguments, and folding piles of impossibly soft cashmere toddler wear. By dinner, I was running on fumes. I made a simple roasted chicken and vegetables. Something I hoped would be inoffensive. I called everyone to the table. A futile exercise in pretending we were a normal family. Chloe picked at her food, her phone propped against her water glass. Julian ate quickly, his eyes darting to his smartwatch every few seconds. The children were quiet, exhausted. Trying to pierce the silence, I said, softly, "You know, when Julian was little, we always made a point to have dinner together. No distractions. It was the one time of day we could really connect." Julian sighed. "It's a different world, Mom. The markets are open 247. The pressure never stops." That was when Chloe looked up. Her voice was low, but it cut through the room like a shard of glass. "You're always making these little comments, Alara. These passive-aggressive comparisons to some perfect little life you think you had. It's not helpful." The air left the room. Julian stared at his plate, saying nothing. I felt the blood drain from my face. I didn't mean it that way. I was just trying to. She cut me off, her voice dripping with a cold, weary contempt. "You talk a lot about contribution for someone who lives in this house for free. And doesn't seem to understand how much it costs to maintain." The words didn't land like a slap. They landed like a surgeon's knife, precise and lethal. My hands began to tremble under the table. I looked at my son, my boy, for defense, for protest. He offered nothing but the tense line of his shoulders. In that suspended moment, the denial I'd been clinging to evaporated. I wasn't part of this family. I was a tenant, a poorly performing one at that. I had paid their Ethereum loan, cared for their children, endured their contempt. And I was still found wanting. I stood up without a word, took my plate to the sink, and washed it slowly. My back to them, my vision blurring. I walked down the hallway to my storage room prison, and sat on the edge of the deflating air mattress. I didn't cry. I just sat there, numb, as the truth settled into my bones. That night, I replayed my entire life. The years of solo parenting, the second jobs I'd worked to put him through college. The dreams I'd deferred, the love I'd given so freely. And it had all been reduced to a line item on their balance sheet. An insufficient one. By morning, a profound shift had occurred. The hurt had been forged into a cold, hard resolve. The silence at breakfast was oppressive. Chloe avoided my gaze. Julian made a show of being rushed. I said nothing. I simply went back to the guest room, pulled my suitcase from behind a tower of boxes, and began to pack the few things I had brought from my real home. The one I never should have left. And then I saw it. My suitcase, already packed and zipped, sitting just outside the bedroom door in the hallway. As if they had been waiting for this. As if my departure had been pre-approved. Something broke then, but it wasn't my spirit. It was the last chain tethering me to their dysfunction. I was done. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to lose their unpaid nanny. Their silent financier, their emotional punching bag. They were about to lose. The one person who would have laid down in traffic for them. And I would ensure they felt the full, devastating weight of that loss. I didn't say goodbye. I ached for Sophie and Leo. But I knew if I saw their sleepy, trusting faces, my resolve would crumble. So I left. I left a single note on the cold granite kitchen counter, written in the precise penmanship I'd perfected over a lifetime of grading papers. Thank you for your hospitality. I wheeled my suitcase through the cavernous silence of their home, and out the front door. No one called out. No one came running down the stairs. The only sound was the quiet, efficient hum of their smart home system, already erasing my presence. As I drove north, back toward the sea, the tears finally came. Not for them, but for myself. For the woman who had believed that love meant erasing your own boundaries. I pulled into my own driveway. Just as the morning sun was glinting off the ocean. The old Victorian house, with its slightly peeling paint and wind-swept garden, stood waiting. It looked like a sanctuary. I opened the heavy front door, and was enveloped by the familiar smell of old books, sea air, and peace. I walked from room to room, my fingers tracing the spines of books, the grain of the wooden banister. The frame of my wedding photo with Arthur. My home, my life. It was all still here. I felt a fool for having abandoned it. Before I even unpacked, I sat at my own well-worn kitchen table, opened my laptop, and logged into my bank. I found the recurring transfers to Julian's account. I stared at them, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then, with a steady hand, I cancelled each one. Cancelled, cancelled, cancelled. The sound of the silence that followed was the most beautiful thing I'd heard in months. That afternoon, a text came through from Julian. "Hey, just making sure you got home okay." I didn't reply. 2 hours later, another. Things were a little tense. "Maybe we can talk this weekend?" Still, I said nothing. By evening, my phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. His message held no apology, no acknowledgement of Chloe's viciousness. Only a strained concern that his financial and domestic auxiliary had gone offline. I made myself a proper pot of tea and drank it from my favorite chipped mug at my own table. They thought they could dismiss me like an underperforming employee. But they had made a critical error in their calculations. They had no idea what my absence would truly cost them. And I was only just beginning to understand my own worth. The first week back in my own life was a process of reclamation. I didn't just clean the house. I purged it of the lingering melancholy I'd left behind. I opened every window, letting the salty, cold Atlantic air scour the rooms. I was not just tidying a house, I was rehabilitating a soul. But the silence, though welcome, was a constant reminder of what I'd lost. I missed Sophie's thoughtful questions. The weight of Leo's head on my shoulder as he fell asleep. I didn't miss the judgment or the entitlement. But the children, their absence was a physical ache. A few days later, I went online and bought them gifts. Not for Julian or Chloe. For them. They were innocent in all of this. I ordered 2 exquisite, hand-painted music boxes. One with a spinning ballerina for Sophie, one with a tiny sailing ship for Leo. I had them engraved, for my darling Sophie Leo, whose song always plays in my heart. Love, Grandma. I paid for express shipping. I received a delivery confirmation 3 days later. There was no thank you text, no call. Nothing. But a week after that, a photo appeared on Chloe's meticulously curated Instagram. Sophie was holding the ballerina box, a genuine, unposed smile on her face. Leo was in the background, carefully winding the ship. Chloe's caption was about simple joys with no mention of their source. It was a small, bitter victory, but I clung to it. Then, the quiet settled again. I filled my days with long walks on the beach, my hands growing rough and cold as I searched for sea glass. A habit Arthur and I had shared. I didn't cry, but I felt a constant, low hum of grief. Then, one night, I woke with a jolt, a sense of dread coiling in my stomach. Something primal, some deep maternal instinct, told me to look. Not to feel, but to look. I went to my desk, fired up my computer, and logged into my financial portal. I scrutinized the statements from the last few months. The ones I'd been too heartbroken to examine closely. The transfers to Julian were there, clean and damning. But then I saw another series of transactions, smaller, more frequent, made from my account but not by me. They were linked to a digital wallet I didn't recognize. My heart began to beat a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I dug deeper, pulling up records I hadn't looked at in years. I cross-referenced dates, amounts. And then I found it. A forgotten security feature Arthur had set up, a log of all online log-ins to our investment accounts. There were dozens of them, at all hours of the day and night. From an IP address I didn't recognize. With trembling fingers, I traced it. It wasn't his office. It was his home office. The transactions weren't for the Ethereum loan. They were transfers to a platform called Quantuma, a sleek, terrifyingly named online high-stakes trading site. Hundreds of dollars, sometimes multiple times a day. Losses chased by more frantic deposits. The timeline stretched back to before I'd even moved in with them. The reality of it hit me with the force of a physical blow. He hadn't just been using my money to pay his mortgage. He had been funneling it into a digital roulette wheel. He had let me pay his bills, cook his meals, and listen to his wife's contempt. All while he was secretly gambling. My financial security away on a screen in his office. I sat in the dark, the blue light of the monitor washing over me, illuminating the ghosts of Arthur's things around the room. I thought of every worried glance I'd dismissed, every excuse I'd accepted, every time I'd opened my checkbook to help. He hadn't been asking for a lifeline. He'd been asking for more chips to feed his addiction. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there as a new, terrible emotion crystallized inside me. A cold, sharp, and utterly profound resentment. It wasn't directed at the boy he had been, but at the man he had become. A man who would watch his mother be belittled, while he used her life's savings to bet on futures that would never come. The woman who would have forgiven anything died in that chair that night. Someone else sat down to breakfast the next morning. I didn't call him. I didn't text. What would be the point? He would lie, obfuscate, blame the stress, blame Chloe, blame the markets. I knew the script. That day, I became a fortress. I called my financial advisor and my lawyer. I moved every remaining cent into new, isolated accounts. I closed out the old ones. I revoked every ounce of financial access he had ever had. I changed the passwords to everything, from my bank to my Netflix account. Then, I called a locksmith and had all the locks on my house changed. It was a symbolic act, but I needed the physical manifestation of my boundaries. I was sealing myself in, and them out. The calls started a week later. First, it was Julian. Casual. "Hey, Mom, just checking in. The kids miss you." But I heard the strain beneath the words. Then the questions began, subtle at first, then more desperate. "Hey, did you get a weird alert from the bank? I think there's a glitch with the Ethereum payment. Did you maybe forget the transfer?" I let every call roll to voicemail. The texts piled up. "Chloe says you're not returning her texts. Are you okay? You've been acting different. Can we please talk?" No, we could not. I watched from a distance of 70 miles. As the facade of their perfect life began to fissure. Chloe's Instagram posts became less frequent. The photos she did post showed the children in older clothes. The backgrounds less meticulously staged. The strain was showing. Then came the confirmation. A letter from the bank, addressed to me. A copy sent due to my initial co-signing on their construction loan years ago. It was a formal notice of default. The word delinquent was printed in stark, black ink. That evening, my phone lit up with a call from Julian. I didn't answer. A text followed seconds later. "Mom, I know you're angry. But we're in trouble. Real trouble. I just need help this one last time. Please." No apology. No acknowledgement of the theft, the lies, the betrayal. Just a raw, naked need. And I'll admit, a part of me, the old, conditioned part, ached to fix it. To be the solution. To prove my worth by sacrificing it. But that part was small now, and growing smaller. Instead, I opened a new journal. On the first page, I wrote a list. Every bill I'd paid, every gift I'd given, every sacrifice I'd made, every hurt I'd swallowed. And at the bottom of the page, I wrote a single sentence that had become my mantra. And still, it was not enough. That sentence was my truth. And I was finally done trying to convince them otherwise. They were about to learn the cost of my absence. And I was about to learn the value of my own presence. I vanished. Not from the world, but from theirs. I deleted my social media accounts. I blocked Julian's number, then Chloe's. I set up a new email address. The silence I created was no longer empty, it was fertile ground. I began to rebuild, not for them, but for me. I started walking the cliff path every morning, no matter the weather. The wind off the ocean was brutal and honest, and it scoured me clean. Then, I found a therapist. A kind, no-nonsense woman named Drive Evans. I didn't go because I thought I was broken. I went because I needed a witness. Someone to whom I could speak the whole, unvarnished truth. Without fear of it being used against me. I told her about Arthur's quiet detachment, about Julian's calculated distance, about Chloe's icy contempt, about the gambling, the stolen money, the dinner table ambush. I cried for 3 sessions straight. I hadn't cried like that in decades. Next, I pulled my old knitting basket out from under the bed. I hadn't touched it since before Arthur's illness. The yarn was still soft, the patterns faded with age. I started slowly, with simple scarves. Then I grew more ambitious. I began creating intricate cable-knit sweaters and blankets, using patterns. I designed myself, inspired by the ocean, waves, shells, gulls in flight. I opened a small online store. I called it Northwind Knits. To my astonishment, orders trickled in. Then they began to flow. Strangers from across the country paid good money for something I had made with my own hands. They sent messages. "This is heirloom quality. It feels like a hug. Thank you." For the first time in a very long time. I was being valued for my creation, not my utility. One afternoon, I wrote in my new journal, in bold, unwavering letters. I am not a burden. I am not an ATM. I am not a convenience. I am a woman. I am resilient. I am worthy of peace. I was building a life, brick by brick, stitch by stitch. And I was doing it alone. Meanwhile, the world I had left behind was crumbling. The silence from Julian stretched for over a month. It was a deep, unnerving quiet, but it no longer felt like a punishment. It felt like justice. Then, the signs of their unraveling began to surface. A barely used Italian leather sofa appeared on a local resale site. I recognized it from their great room. Then, Chloe's coveted collection of designer handbags was listed on a consignment site. The final, unmistakable sign came when I saw a grainy photo from a town event. A friend had posted online. In the background, parked on the street, was a modest, decade-old sedan. Tiffany's massive, spotless SUV was gone. Their polished image was tarnishing, publicly. The next time I saw Julian, it was by accident. I was in Portland for a yarn exhibition, and I saw him in a coffee shop. He didn't see me. He was alone, hunched over a small table, staring into a cheap cup of coffee. He was wearing a wrinkled shirt, and he looked thin, pale, and years older. The confident financier veneer was completely gone, replaced by a hollowed-out exhaustion. For one heartbreaking second, the old impulse flared. To go to him. To ask about the children. To smooth it all over. But then I heard Chloe's voice. Crisp and cruel, in my memory, doesn't actually contribute enough. I turned and walked away. That night, I cooked myself. Seared scallops, bought fresh from the dock that morning. I set my table for one, with a cloth napkin and a single candle. My house was warm, quiet, and entirely mine. Then, just after Thanksgiving, a package arrived. No return address. Inside, carefully wrapped, were the 2 music boxes I had sent the children. They had been added to. Sophie's was now covered in carefully glued pink glitter. Leo's had a small, clumsily painted Maine flag stuck to its side. Tucked inside was a piece of paper with a message in a child's handwriting. We miss you, Grams. Come back. I sat on my hallway floor and cried. I cried for them, for their confusion, for the innocent casualties. In a war they didn't understand. I ached to hold them. But instead, I went to the closet and pulled out 2 small, hand-knitted sweaters I'd made for them. One in stormy blue, one in seafoam green. I packed them in a box. With some new books and a bag of their favorite maple candies. I included a note. A grandmother's love is a constant tide. It always returns. I mailed it the next day. No return address. It was love, but on my terms. They had to learn. I would not disappear from their lives. But I would no longer be the foundation upon which their parents' dysfunction was built. The holidays were quiet, solemn, and deeply peaceful. I decorated a small fir tree with the old, familiar ornaments, hanging Arthur's favorite. A chipped glass star, right at the top. I didn't host. I didn't travel. I baked my mother's shortbread recipe and let the simple, buttery scent fill the house. I missed the children terribly. I wondered what their Christmas had been like. The answer came not from a photo, but from a single, stark text from Julian on December 27th. Hope you had a good Christmas. That was it. No, we missed you. No, the kids asked for you. Just a hollow, obligatory ping. But I already knew. The evidence was in the digital silence. No Christmas morning photos. No tree. No matching pajamas. And then I saw it. An ad on a local parents' forum. Urgent, seeking experienced nanny, full-time. Non-smoker. Must have own car. References required. The poster was Chloe. My heart clenched. They needed help. Real help. Not a bailout, but the kind of daily, grinding support I had provided for free. The kind that costs a fortune in a city like Boston. I could have called. I could have offered. The old me would have. The new me did not. Instead, I sent another package to the children. Inside were the sweaters, some warm hats, and a new set of books. And for Julian and Chloe, a single, plain card. On the front, a picture of a lighthouse in a storm. Inside, I had written, "You cannot keep taking from the well without ever filling it back up." I signed nothing. Days later, a small box appeared on my porch. Inside were the 2 photo frames I'd sent of me with the children, returned. But the clothes were kept. And on the back of the card I had sent, in Julian's handwriting, was a new message. Message received. I stood on my porch, holding the frames, the winter wind biting at my cheeks. He was starting to see. Not all of it, not yet. But the scales were falling from his eyes. The next part would be the hardest, for him, for them, for the children. But I would not intervene. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is step back and allow the consequences to land. It's the only way they learn to stand on their own. The call came on a rainy Thursday night. I was winding a new skein of merino wool, the rhythm calming and meditative. My phone buzzed on the side table. I almost let it go, but a gut feeling told me to pick up. "Mom?" Julian's voice was ragged, stripped bare. "I need to talk to you. Can I please come over?" There was no demand, no manipulation. Just a stark, simple plea. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I simply said, "I'll be home tomorrow afternoon." At exactly 1 p.m., I heard a car door shut outside. I looked through the window and saw his sedan, now with a small dent in the fender. He walked up the path to my door. His shoulders slumped as if carrying a tremendous weight. When I opened it, the man standing there was a stranger. The arrogance was gone. The carefully constructed image had vanished. He just looked young, and terrified, and utterly lost. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I hesitated for a single beat, then moved aside. He sat on the very edge of my sofa, as if afraid to claim the space. He wrung his hands, staring at the floor. "I lost everything," he said, the words rushing out in a choked whisper. The trading. It wasn't just the money you gave me. It was everything. I took out second liens, I borrowed against my bonus. I thought I could win it back. I always thought I could win it back. I stayed silent. Let him sit in the truth. He looked around my living room, at the knitting basket by the fire. The simple, sturdy furniture, the calm. "It's so quiet here," he said, almost to himself. "It's peaceful." Still, I said nothing. And then it all poured out. "I have a problem, Mom. A real problem. It's an addiction. I've tried to stop. I swear to God I've tried. But every time the pressure at work mounts, or Chloe gets on my case about the money, I just disappear into my phone. I chase the loss. I make it worse." He paused, swallowing hard. "I've ruined us. The house is going into foreclosure. The kids, they hear us fighting about money every night. Chloe is talking about taking them and moving back to Connecticut. I don't know what to do." He finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "Can you help me, please? Just one more time. Just to get us stable. I'll pay you back. I swear I will." I looked at my son. My child. The boy I had sung to sleep. And I saw the man he had become, drowning in a sea of his own making. I stood up slowly. I walked to my front door and opened it. The cold sea air swept into the room. "No," I said, my voice soft but absolute. "Not today." He stared at me, stunned, as if I'd spoken in another language. "I'm not saying never," I continued, my gaze steady. "But not today. Not until you can sit in this room and understand, truly understand, what it cost me to watch. You let your wife eviscerate me, while you were secretly setting my financial security on fire. He tried to speak, to protest, but I held up a hand. I loved you through every stumble, every victory, every heartache. I gave until I had nothing left to give, and you stood by and watched it happen. You allowed it. So now, you will have to learn what it means to live inside the consequences of that. A single tear traced a path down his unshaven cheek. I'm sorry, he whispered. And for the very first time, I heard the genuine ring of truth in it. But truth wasn't enough. Not yet. He left 10 minutes later. He didn't argue. He didn't slam the door. He walked to his car. Like a man who finally understood the weight of his own actions. That night, I cried. But I didn't cry for the son I might have lost. I cried for the mother. I had been the one who believed love meant having no boundaries. That woman was gone. In her place was someone new. Someone who was ready to dictate the terms of her own life. 3 weeks of silence passed. But this silence felt different. It felt like a necessary pause, a space for reflection. Then, one morning, another knock. I opened the door to find him there again. He looked clearer, tired but present. His eyes met mine directly. Can I come in? He asked. I nodded. He sat on the sofa, but this time, he didn't look like a visitor. He looked like a man asking for a chance. I've been going to meetings, he said. Every week. Gah. I got a sponsor. He took a deep breath. I sold my watch. The Rolex. I'm driving for a delivery service in the evenings after my day job. It's humbling, but it's honest. I waited. I knew there was more. I'm scared, he admitted, his voice raw. We're 3 months behind on the Ethereum. The bank won't wait much longer. Chloe, she's filed for legal separation. She says she can't trust me. He looked up, his eyes pleading not for money, but for guidance. I need help, Mom. But not a check. I need you to teach me how to be an adult. How to be responsible. How to stop looking for someone else to fix my messes. I felt the tectonic plates of our relationship shift. This was the crossroads. I stood, went to my desk, and returned with a simple manila folder. I handed it to him. He opened it slowly. Inside was a printed budget spreadsheet. A list of financial counselors and debt consolidation services. I'd vetted, a payment plan proposal for the bank, and a single, stark agreement. My terms, I said, my voice even. I will pay the past due amount on the Ethereum loan. One time. That's it. It will stop the foreclosure, but the rest is on you. You will adhere to this budget. You will provide me with read-only access to your main accounts. So I can see you're attending your meetings and staying clean. If I see one suspicious transaction, one missed meeting, I walk away. Permanently. He didn't flinch. And, I continued, if you want my guidance. You will follow through with the separation from Chloe. Financially, completely. You handle your debts. She handles hers. You need to untangle yourself from that dynamic to heal. He hesitated, a flicker of the old fear in his eyes. She's not going to like that. That is no longer my concern, or yours, I said. Your concern is your recovery and your children. If you stay enmeshed in that cycle, I cannot and will not be a part of it. He looked down at the papers, at the budget lines, the cold, hard numbers. His hands were steady. Then he nodded, a single, decisive movement. Okay. We shook hands, a formal, solemn agreement. He signed the papers. We set a time for our first weekly financial review. At the door, he turned to me. I never knew how much I was leaning on you. He said, his voice thick with a new emotion, respect. I thought I was standing on my own. That's the thing about leaning, I said, offering a faint, sad smile. You never realize how much weight the other person is carrying until they step aside. He left. I locked the door behind him and leaned against it, the silence of my house wrapping around me like a blanket. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim or a savior. I felt like a partner in his recovery, but on my terms. I had not given him a fish, I was offering to teach him to fish. But only if he agreed to come to the river and do the work himself. The final lesson was theirs to learn, and it was the hardest one of all. The following weeks were a tense, quiet ballet of progress and setback. Julian stuck to the plan, mostly. He was attending his meetings. The frantic, desperate energy began to recede, replaced by a weary, dogged determination. The read-only access to his accounts showed small, honest deposits from his delivery job and no more outflows to Quantuma or its ilk. But the strain with Chloe was immense. I saw it in the way he'd slump after a phone call with her, in the tight set of his jaw when he discussed the separation agreement. She was fighting him every step of the way, refusing to believe the money well had truly run dry. The most telling moment came when he finally stood his ground on the finances. He told me about it during one of our check-ins, his voice flat with exhaustion. I told her I was handling my debt, and she needed to handle hers. That the days of me magically making it appear were over. He let out a short, humorless laugh. She didn't scream, she just got very quiet. She said, "I waited for you to become the man you promised you'd be. I don't know who you are now." They weren't reconciling, but a strange, new dynamic was emerging. Not one of codependent blame, but of stark, separate accountability. And I did not offer advice. I did not mediate. I simply held the boundary I had set. A week later, he called. It was late. I was blocking a newly finished cashmere blanket, the wool soft and fragrant in my hands. "Mom," he said, and his voice was different. It was clear, resolved. "I've found an apartment. A small one. 2 bedrooms. Near a good school district." I set the blanket down. "Are you sure?" "Yes," he said, and the certainty in his voice was a new thing, a solid thing. "I can't stay in that house. It's toxic. I need to build something real for my kids, even if it's small. It's going to be hard. The commute will be terrible. But I can do it. I want to do it." I took a deep breath, pride and sorrow and hope twisting together in my chest. "You're right," I said, my voice thick. "You can." We ended the call not with a promise to each other, but with a quiet acknowledgement of the path ahead. A few days later, I drove down to Boston. I didn't tell him I was coming. I parked down the street from a small, neat duplex with a tiny fenced yard. I saw him then, carrying a box of books from a rented truck, Leo. Trailing behind him with a stuffed animal. He was wearing old jeans and a sweatshirt. He looked tired, but his posture was straight. He was doing it. He didn't see me. I didn't approach. I just watched for a few minutes. Then drove home, my heart full of a complicated, aching peace. The final time he came to my door, he wasn't asking for anything. He held out a key, a simple, silver key to his new apartment. "I did it," he said, and for the first time since he was a little boy. I saw unadulterated pride in his eyes. First and last month's rent. Security deposit. All from the delivery job and my paycheck. No debt. No tricks. I looked at my son. Not the ghost he had been, not the manipulator he had become. But the man he was fighting to be. "I'm proud of you," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. "I wouldn't be here if you hadn't," he trailed off, searching for the words. "If you hadn't loved me enough to let me fall." I reached out and hugged him. It was not the hug of a mother comforting a child. It was the hug of 2 survivors, acknowledging the storm they had weathered and the solid ground they now stood upon. I watched him drive away, and I felt it, a profound, unshakable freedom. Not from him, but for him. For me. For us. He had finally learned to stand on his own. And in doing so, he had finally given me the gift of being able to let go without guilt. The war was over. We had both, in our own ways, won. I turned and walked back into my home, to the quiet peace I had built, and closed the door. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for sharing this time with me. If you enjoyed this journey, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story. Until next time, take care, and keep cherishing the chapters of your life.